computer. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome. Because of the confusion, I don't have a good joke for you today. Does anybody have one? Anybody? You are such sissies. Somebody step forward with a stupid joke. No. Okay, fine. Anyway, we had a big week last week. We got to listen to Mr. Barr of the Murphys, the Dropkick Murphys. He was really, really interesting. Had lots of good feedback from the people that I brought along with it. We got a big, big day today, and I am going to turn it over at this point to Hannah Rice. But before I do that, we are recording. And so if you will raise your hand or say you got a problem if there's no problem. Everybody good? Anybody got a problem? Say now or forever hold your peace. All right. Good. With that, I'm going to see if I can turn this over and make Hannah, see if I can do this. I am making you the co-host. Is that okay?
Yes. I didn't create a fancy PowerPoint or anything, so hopefully. Oh, I know. You hyped me up. You were like, this is such a big day, but I don't necessarily feel like I prepared myself for that, so we'll just roll with it. So John, we had chatted a little bit about, oh, Nancy, are you okay with being recorded? Cool. We had chatted a little bit about maybe having deeper conversations about social media and APGs. And because we had also talked about with Hunter starting up his APG, like what are some of the like onboarding and orientation materials that are helpful to have like as a first-time supervisor bringing on some like younger adult staff. And so I had sent the 3 documents that I sent to this email thread today along to Hunter, and I thought they might be helpful for us to go through today. But really, I think that what should guide our conversation is whatever it feels like helpful to other people. So if you guys have questions or thoughts and want to take it in a different direction, I think that's excellent. I will take everybody else's lead. And John, do you think we should start? So I sent, let me just pull up. I sent 3 documents. One was a document about our code of ethics. The other was a document about communication ethics. And the other was a document about our social media policy. Do people have a preference on which one we pull up first and go through?
I just wanted to say that this email etiquette one may get sent to like all 100 of my employees here shortly. So just saying.
That one is the most recently developed, and it came about because of COVID times and all of the electronic communications that have increased drastically. And I've been having my people CC me on things and noticing things that I don't love about their communication. So we had a little training on that, and things have gotten a lot better. So I think that was really what it took. But why don't we can hop into that document, and I'm really bad at sharing my screen, but I'm going to try to do that while I pull that up. Okay, so let's see. Do you guys see my screen? Yes, okay, cool. It's even more complicated because it's not in one page. But so basically, like I just explained a little bit for context, that we have seen a really high increase in electronic communications between youth peer support and care teams or service providers and each other and youth and families. And I was noticing just a lot of communications that sort of seemed like they didn't reflect like true intentions of what the youth peer support meant. And so we had to talk a lot about how like a hastily written email without any punctuation or without any capitalization of people's names or not paying attention to the spelling of people's names can really come across in like a way that can feel unengaging or like just a little bit unprofessional and abrupt and abrasive, and that really isn't the way that we want to like lead with. So one of the things that I learned when I took a seminar when I first like got to college, and they pulled up a whole bunch of actual email addresses that they had gotten from people who applied to the college, and they were like very embarrassing email addresses. Because they were like, you know, childhood email addresses that maybe you created on AOL 10 years ago and like are still using, but maybe you should have created a new email address for the specific purpose of communicating with colleges that you're applying to. So that's where use your professional email address comes from. But just having like a formal greeting to open up a communication so that it's not just an abrupt like yes or no, or you know, just something that's more personable, since we're not able to like be in person and build that rapport that way right now. And something that it has become a really big pet peeve of mine with the communication that I've had internally with the youth peer supporters is not making use of the subject line. I get so many emails every day that like having a concise to the point subject line, and I know that that's not just a me thing, that's an everybody thing at this point. So having a subject line that tells me, is this urgent? Do I need to respond to it? And like a little bit more about what the topic of the email is has been like really helpful in being able to prioritize what communications I need to urgently look at. So I can imagine that for youth and families, that's very much the same. And also for other service providers that youth peer supporters are communicating with. And then we just have being clear, polite, and succinct. So making sure that things aren't too long-winded, because that's when people stop reading and sort of, you know, tune out of your email and might miss something important. And signing off with a thank you, so that it is really more like a formal letter as we think about it in, you know, snail mail. So emails are forever, just like anything that is, you know, broadcasted on the internet. So making sure that people who are writing email communications are aware that those can and often do come back to be shown as proof of whatever somebody wants them to. So if a tone or a message is unclear and is ambiguous and can be left up to interpretation, that will happen. So it's best not to you know, use language or messaging that is not upfront and clear. And then something that was happening with our team was just being a little bit unrealistic about the expectation of instant gratification, instant answers, instant communications back. And then I just have ending off with practicing common courtesy and making sure that we're promptly checking our emails when we start our workday, and not like having a lack of response for multiple days on end. And if that needs to happen, having like an out of office responder on so that people know that they're not being ignored, that you're really out of the office. So I'm open to feedback, thoughts, discussion about this.
So Hannah, I just posted in the chat, this is Heidi, and this is fantastic. I recently, just a few weeks ago, had a very lengthy conversation with my 13-year-old about how do we compose an email after being CC'd on a teacher email. And it included all of those things that you said, you know, 0 punctuation, like no greeting, not even his name. And I was like, and he was expressing frustration to me just about, you know, that his teacher wasn't following up. And I was like, first of all, you didn't include your name. He's like, she has my email address. And I was like, there's no specific ask in this email, right? And so sometimes I think even, you know I'm getting like hundreds of emails a day, and even like from my direct supervisors, like there might be, a 2-page email that is sent to me and there's like an ask buried in there, but it's not really specific, right? And so, just making sure that if there is, something that you need for a follow-up, like being really clear about what that is in the email communication. Excellent work.
Are there other people who have things that they might add or suggest?
I love it. It's awesome.
I think it is especially important dealing with families, with parents and families, especially important. Although I think it's important with everybody, but man, you mess up with them, it's a problem.
Yeah, I think that being overly informal, especially like in the initial phases of like building a relationship and the trust between people, can really be a turnoff to some people, especially families, like you were saying, John.
Well, I really like it that y'all did this and codified it, because it's really easy to get into, well, everybody knows how to email, and do that. And especially our talented, young, effervescent counselors and peer counselors, they're going to jump out there and do stuff. So giving them some direction and stuff. I love this. This is great stuff.
Oh, I got major eye rolls about this. They did not want to have a training on how to write an email, but I will say afterwards, all of them have drastically improved their electronic communication. So we clearly needed it.
This might not apply to y'all, but one other thing that I am finding myself having to remind other professionals in the field is a HIPAA disclaimer at the bottom, which I imagine varies based on whether or not you're a protected entity or what your function and capacity is with the emails. But that's the one thing that just came to my mind that I would add, that HIPAA statement at the end.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And if I could add one small thing too, just something to think about would be just a small statement about when it is and when it's mostly not appropriate to use the urgent button. I have like one colleague in particular that marks every email as urgent, which is annoying, right? So that's just something I put out as just a warning that urgent button can be useful if used correctly, but not used all the time.
Definitely.
Also, reply all. Reply all is a very special thing that it needs to be reserved for true reply all situations. And one way to avoid issues with both HIPAA and reply all is to send the email to yourself and blind carbon copy every other individual that you want it to go to. And so then the people who are responding can't accidentally respond to a group of 100 people saying, you have my name spelled wrong.
Please take me off this
really
list.
Nice.
Get that one too.
This is nicely done though. Nice job putting it together.
Sean, what did you say?
You'll get emails where someone will say like, please take me off this list. I don't belong here.
Right.
Or somebody replies all like, oh, that it's just about them. Like it just applies to them. And it's like, you hit reply all. You didn't want to do that.
I definitely have been part of multiple email threads that included similar communications. So, and I apologize for my dog barking in the background. Hopefully that will subside.
You know what it seems like we could put together a second page here, and it would be a list of pet peeves, and it would be real directional. Tell us what to look at. Yeah.
I'm taking notes on the document, so I will provide an edited rendition of this after this meeting. But we can just have it as a living document that we add to. Do people have a preference about how we proceed in terms of the next document that we open? So we have our code of ethics, which I probably don't need to read to everybody in full. And mostly I included that because I just think it's important to have a code of ethics. I think it's important that everybody that is an APG staff member knows what ethics are, knows what ethical dilemmas are, knows like the foundation for your organization and what ethics guide the work that you do. And then the other document is the one that's specifically related to social media. So do people have a thought on which one to go to next?
The professional, excuse me, text messaging really got deep, really hit home. The
Yeah.
other as well, and it's very good foundational things, well said, but the professional text messaging etiquette really hit home as well.
I forgot that I didn't scroll all the way through and cover that. Does everybody want me to go through the text messaging ones as well? Sorry about that. I don't know why that stopped.
Yeah, I may have to step away visually for just a second, but I'll be right back. But go ahead and rock on. All right.
All right.
Okay. You don't need me.
So for the professional text messaging etiquette, we had put some subpoints because this was also just becoming sort of something that was brought to my attention that could have used improvement from all of the youth peer supporters. So the first one is text only when there is an established business relationship. A lot of my generation and younger do not like making phone calls, and I include myself in that. I really would prefer to send a text message or an email. But when you are just presented with somebody's contact information and you don't know them, or if that's their communication style and preference, it really usually isn't the most appropriate way to go about communicating. Typically making a phone call and leaving a voicemail or sending an email is a more professional way to begin your relationship. And really, I always encourage the youth peer supporters to be checking in with people about what their preferred communication style is and accommodating that, instead of accommodating that they personally don't like making phone calls. Like, you know, a lot of times somebody who, you know, is trying to manage multiple children and make a communication doesn't really have the ability or the attention span to be able to focus on sending like a text message rather than having a phone call that could take 2 minutes, whereas writing the text message and continuing to get interrupted by what's going on in their life really can be a barrier to completing a communication. The second one is paying attention to timing. So this is something that I'm still working on my team with, but we actually did end up implementing sort of a strict timing, like work hours where phone calls and text messages were appropriate among like team communications, because I am very much a morning person and I keep my work phone on me at all times so that in the event of an emergency, I can be reached. And I was getting text messages, you know, at 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., weekends, you know, whatever. And those are all okay if they're emergencies. But when they're not emergencies, my protocol is that I would prefer an email about them if it's after 6:30 p.m. So that goes for any day. And that really allows me to have a mental health boundary where I know that I don't need to respond to my phone buzzing after 6:30 p.m. unless it's an emergency. So like I can still leave the volume on and still be responsive to my phone because I know that anything that's coming in as a communication is an emergency and I do need to respond to it. So I think that with the work that we do, and probably all of you as well, every family, every youth, what hours they're available is going to vary. A lot of times that means needing to accommodate later than normal business hours for check-in calls or just communications. And I think that that's totally acceptable. And I think that the best practice is just being curious and like inquisitive about that earlier on, so that it's not seen as a disrespect to make a phone call like later on in the evening hours if that's what if that's what works for the caregiver, that's what works for the family or youth, because those are their only free hours. Then you know, that makes sense. But otherwise, for people like me, I would not want to get a non-urgent phone call at 9 p.m. to be resolving something that I could look at tomorrow. So just, yeah, making sure that people are respectful of when they're making communications. Knowing when a call would be easier than a text message. This again is something generationally that I've found with the youth peer supporters, where they would very much like to avoid a phone call at all costs. So they will text a huge page without enough context, and I have no idea what they're talking about, and I'm on a Zoom meeting all day every day and I can't read the text message, and it would be so much easier if they would just call me and explain, and it would be able to be resolved much more simply and, like, you know, with less confusion. So we're definitely working on helping them to overcome their distaste for making phone calls to us, to each other, and to like the people that they're working with in care teams. So that's actually going really well. I think that's a life skill that I'm patting myself on the back for helping them to become more familiar with, because phone calls are not going away. The fourth one that I have is keeping it brief. With voice to text capabilities, it's easy to send a rambling, lengthy text message. If your text is more than a couple of sentences, a phone call or email is probably better. Sometimes there are phones that, like, you'll end up getting a text message that's like broken up because of a certain amount of characters being exceeded, and then sometimes they'll come in the wrong order. And it, you know, if you're needing to exceed the amount of characters for one text, it really probably is better to be an email communication or a phone call. No texting of confidential information. Like this says, you know, one screenshot of that and it can be, the information can be, you know, out of your control and into anybody's hands. So that really isn't a good way to be communicating about confidential information. When we're working with youth and families and other service providers, even if their preferred communication is text message, the text messages should still be coming off as professional. We don't want to be like overly familiar and overly, you know, I think I caution the youth peer supporters even against using humor in text messages or written communication, because oftentimes the tone just doesn't translate. And so, like I said, in writing emails, just being as straightforward as you possibly can be so that there's no room to misinterpret what you're saying. The less ambiguity, the more likely your message is going to be understood the way that you intended for it to be. Number 7 is texting clear, specific information. Again, little room for misinterpretation and little room for your message to be lost. Replying promptly to other people's communications, text messages to you. So something that the millennial generation and lower need to work on is putting away their cell phones when they're in meetings or when they're otherwise, you know, occupied, especially this has happened when youth peer support are like providing youth peer support, and like this was prior to COVID. There were a couple of times where I made a call to one of them and they answered it and told me that they were meeting with their youth, and I was like, well, why did you answer the phone? Like, why is your phone on and distracting you? That's concerning. So just knowing when it's appropriate to be tuned into what's happening in the present moment, and knowing when, you know, it's going to come off as rude or disrespectful or disengaged when you're on your phone. And then signing off gracefully is number 10. Some texts can go on and on. And when the communication goal has been reached, don't be afraid to sort of indicate that with your ending text message so that it doesn't feel like anything's left hanging. And, you know, no need to continue dragging out a conversation, especially if we're talking about like a youth or a family. I think that is all that we have for text communications. Do people have feedback on that or any things that they might add?
I just have a little feedback. I was not being rude looking down, but I was printing all of this out because it's very timely for us. We're about to hire another facilitator, and this is something really important to me. We have multiple ways that we communicate with each other and with the parents and everybody, and sometimes we use different platforms simultaneously, and it's not as effective. So this is a good foundation for us to have this talk, like literally in an hour when we have our staff meeting. So I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm really glad.
Yeah, seriously.
The Think page, is that part of this group, or did I get them shuffled?
So we have binders that all of our youth peer supporters use, and that is part of this communication like section of the binder. So yeah, I can go over that if you want me to.
Oh, go ahead.
I have written the acronym THINK, and probably some people have heard of this, but it's just like a way to check ourselves on communications before we send something that might be like a little bit too abrupt. So the T stands for, is it true? The H stands for, is it helpful? The I stands for, is it inspiring? The N stands for, is it necessary? And the K stands for, is it kind? I think that's been a really good way to regulate communications, especially when either like another service provider or care team member is being like hostile or adversarial, really like depersonalizing that. And that can be really hard, especially for young adults. And I think that young adults also can tend to take the brunt of people's frustration or misunderstanding because they're like a pretty easy target. So just making sure that like we're able to have some way to regulate communication and not be the ones that are fueling a fire, even if we didn't start it. All right. Do people have things that they would add to it, things that have come up for them that are relevant to this? Okay. So I think, actually, you know what? I don't think we made a decision about which document we were going to switch to, but since it didn't seem like people had a preference, I will go ahead and move to the Code of Ethics and Practice document. This document is something that we had adapted from NAMI, New Hampshire. And I think I sort of introduced ethics and why I feel like ethics are super important at the beginning of our call. But just to sort of reiterate that, I think that when young adults especially, and that's who I'm working with, have like a foundational knowledge of like the ethics that guide an organization, when they come into ethical dilemmas or scenarios in real life, in real time, it's much easier for them to make a more informed choice about how they respond or react to those scenarios, because they're able to have like a guided thought about, you know, what a supervisor would want them to do based on like what the organization stands for. And that won't always be like something that saves us from having ethical scenarios that are handled less than ideally, but it's definitely been really helpful for us in a lot of ways. But so the beginning of our document has a little section that says, as a youth peer support specialist, I will. So these are all like, this is something that the youth peer support specialists review with me and sign with me the day that they start their position. So we're really just regrounding in what this role means and what the responsibilities, the core responsibilities really are. And mostly those look like sharing lived experiences in a strategic way with discretion, supporting youth rather than seeing themselves as an expert in someone else's story, supporting them to be the expert on their own story and their own wellness journey, acknowledging that each youth's goals and ideas about their future are going to look different than what maybe you would want for them or their future. Identifying any cultural biases that they need to unpack, and, you know, recognizing that those biases are something that clouds all of our judgment and all of our perspectives. So really being mindful about doing that work internally, taking responsibility for clarifying their role, building partnerships with other people that are involved in the care of the young people that we're working with, committing to honesty in all interactions, committing to non-judgment and respect, and committing to non-adversarial approaches to communication. So we have a couple of, so principle 1 is about integrity and just maintaining high standards of competence and integrity within the role. I don't think it'll be super helpful for me to read through all of these. But you guys have the documents, you can definitely do that. Principle 2 is about safety and maintaining the safety of themselves and the youth that they work with. A lot of that is about like confidentiality and not disclosing information that is not theirs to disclose. Abstaining from engaging in any social or physical, emotional relationships outside of the support that they provide for the youth that they work with. Not accepting gifts or other professional services or like compensation as payment for their service as a youth peer supporter. And then the document ends with, through educational activities, supervision, and personal commitment, I will stay informed and up to date, engage in helping relationships, perform and present myself as a competent youth peer supporter, seek appropriate professional supervision or consultation, and refrain from distorting or misusing or misrepresenting my experience, knowledge, skills, or research findings. I feel like I'm scrolling the wrong way because that does not end with a period. So I need to check my own grammar there. So this document really is more specific to my organization and what we do. I think it would look, it could be the bare draft that people start from, but would need to fill in themselves to be more reflective of what code of ethics your organization works under and you're expecting for the people that work for your organization to work under. But again, I just think it's a really important thing to be created as a formal document. Do people currently have something that looks like this? Sorta.
I think you boil it down very nicely into 2 pages, which is very helpful. I think all of these things are formatted in a way in the peer support training that they receive here. But at the same time, they see that over a period of time, and really to have it cooked down like this is very beneficial. And then where you have them sign off on that and you can refer back to that for guidance is outstanding. So.
Thank you.
And hopefully I conveyed that properly. Yeah, if this is part of a 4 or 6 hour course, it's one thing to have it summarized and is very meaningful to bring it together. And
yeah, I'm like a very visual. I definitely need like visual representation of things that I hear. Like an auditory training is one, like you said, like the 4 to 6 hours where you're overloaded with information and stimulation and you're learning way too many new things. Having it like written in front of me is a much more effective way for me to actually be able to take in the information. And so as part of their binders that we have them all keep for themselves, this is the front page of that. So this is like day 1, we go over this document, they sign it, they ask any questions that they have about it, and they keep it in their binders as like a reminder to refer back to if need be. All right, I guess I will move to the communications. Oh no.
Social media.
That's the one. So I think that this is a pretty short document, so I think that I'll sort of read through it and then have people give their thoughts and feedback on it. But this, pretty quickly, just with young adults working with other young people, became something that needed to be formalized and put in their binders as well. And I still, with new hires, have people who think that the settings on their profiles are super private and no one would be able to find them, but you would be surprised what lengths a young person will go to find what they're looking for on the internet, and it is always possible. So I just, continue to have this conversation, and even with the family peer support that we work with through NAMI New Hampshire, this is something that is sort of a hot issue for us to continue having conversations about, because some family members do want to connect with their family peer support as well, and continue being a support system for each other after they no longer use services. And so for us, for Youth Move, that's like super strongly discouraged. Obviously, I can't control what happens when somebody's no longer employed by Youth Move, or when somebody people are able to be sneaky, and people are able to, go and do, things that they know that they're not supposed to do in terms of social media. But by having this in like a formal document where they sign as well, they're signing that, there are consequences to actions up to termination if there's an egregious violation of our social media policy. So at least they already have that. There's no question about that. If there is a violation that happens, we can refer back to this very clearly. So it says, Youth Move New Hampshire's organizational policy strictly prohibits the use of personal social media accounts to communicate or interact with youth and young adults who are receiving services through Youth Move in any way. Employees are permitted to create professional Facebook accounts specifically for communicating with youth and young adults receiving services after receiving consent from their supervisors. Employees understand that they are mandated reporters. If they should come upon a social media post that indicates that a youth or young adult receiving services from Youth Move is at risk of self-harm or harm to others, they must immediately take a picture or screenshot and get in touch with their supervisor to report the incident. If the employee feels that the youth or young adult is at risk of immediately harming themselves or others, they should contact appropriate emergency services. Employees of Youth Move must conduct themselves at all times as representatives of the organization and ensure that their profile and related content is consistent with how they wish to present themselves to colleagues, citizens, and other stakeholders. Employees understand that they are ambassadors of Youth Move New Hampshire, and that social media posts regarding engaging in risky, inappropriate, or illegal activity, even on private social media accounts, is not acceptable. In accordance with the core values of Youth Move New Hampshire, employees agree not to post content that promotes, fosters, or perpetuates discrimination on the basis of race, creed, color, age, religion, gender, marital status, status with regard to public assistance, national origin, physical or mental disability, or sexual orientation. Employees understand that it is not acceptable for Youth Move New Hampshire staff to accept friend requests from peers who they are actively supporting using their own personal social media profiles. When a youth or young adult is no longer receiving services from Youth Move New Hampshire, the employee may use their own discretion in accepting friend requests on their own personal social media accounts. Respectful, kind, supportive treatment of all other Youth Move New Hampshire staff is expected at all times, including on all social media platforms. Cyberbullying and making comments that are degrading, harmful, or negative will not be tolerated. Employees are strictly prohibited from posting anything on social media that is in violation of anyone's confidentiality or privacy. Employees understand that they will be held accountable for what they post on social media. They recognize that everything posted online stays online forever, and that everything posted, often on a personal basis, even outside of work, reflects on and impacts the reputation of Youth Move New Hampshire. Employees understand that if for any reason an incident occurs that violates the social media policy, they are expected to bring the issue to the attention of their supervisor immediately, so that they can work together to find a resolution. Employees found in violation of this policy may be subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination of employment. So then they sign and date, and again, this goes right behind the code of ethics in their binder, so they have a reminder of exactly what they signed. and they can reference it at any point. I think that's all I have. Do people have a social media policy in place currently? Has that come up for you at all, Robin? Like, has that?
This has been something that we've talked about, but we haven't had an issue yet. So I think this is perfect timing before it ever becomes an issue. Yeah, I'm big into prevention, so I appreciate it.
A comment I might want to make is that having these things signed and all, there's a reason for that. It's protection of everybody. You as an organization need to step forward and say, we did our part in informing everybody of what needs to be done and what can't be done, etc. If you don't do that, then you are wide open for any kind of lawsuit, you know, all sorts of problems. So as much of a hassle as it is, you know, to do all the paperwork, keep up with all of it, file it, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. It's still worth doing, and because it'll protect the organization as well as protect the clients. Everybody is protected because you have done this. Plus, yeah, they need to hear all this. I am sure that everybody on this call knows how, what's the word I'm looking for? How anything can be brought up and said, you violated this, you know, this thing, or that was a bad post, or I can't believe you said that. It can happen, and it's going to happen. So having conversations on what to do when it happens, like you said, Hannah, and having sessions that periodically, as much of a hassle as it is, it's a good idea to every year go back, get everybody together, talk about it, look at it again, you know, and again, and record that you did that and everybody was there again, so you can protect your clients, your efforts, your program, everything. It's just a good idea to do that. Y'all know me. I mean, this is not my bailiwick. This is not where I live. I don't care. I have suffered and done it anyway for many, many years. And right now it's so small and dinky, I'm not getting too far into it, but it's coming very, very rapidly, very rapidly. So, and I have done it in the past. I would like to throw up, does anybody else have anything to ask Hannah on what's been presented so far? Let me get out of the way here.
I just wanted to add one thing that has come up after we wrote this policy, and we haven't written it into a formal policy at this point. But when staff members become friends with each other, I think it's important to have the conversation that is subjecting them to, like, if their profile really is private, then I can't log into, you know, Google and see what they're writing. But if they become friends with somebody, that person can see what they're writing and very well can bring it to me. And that's happened before.
Yeah.
And all of those things, even though their profile was private and I couldn't personally see it, it's still coming to me. So yeah. I still have the information and this still stands. So I think that it's important to have those conversations with people so that they can make their own choice about whether or not they want to be friends on social media. That's fine. That's not something I feel like I need to regulate, because I want to be able to trust that what you're doing in your private time on your private accounts is appropriate and okay for other people to see.
Yeah, it's a really interesting phenomena that goes down, because we have become, all of us have become more visible to everybody. And so there's some good sides to that, frankly, in staffing and us looking at our own business and what we're going to do, and, you know, knowing that we're not just out here hiding, doing weird stuff and walking into a session and trying to act like, oh, here I am. You know, we're just human beings, and it's a trip. I would like to suggest that we need a class on social media, and really about how to use it and things you guys have done that promote program and maybe facilitate actual program activities, if you've done any of those kind of things. I mean, every time we do a Zoom meeting, to some degree, we're using tech, you know, to do treatment and that kind of stuff. But I know that a lot of you belong to different, you know, different groups and things like that. And I would love to have a class on what's been done, what worked, what didn't work, because our job is to reach out to people and let them know we have answers here. And social media is a powerful tool, and some of you may have lots more success and ability than that. And if nothing else, I think it might be something that could help. What do y'all think about that?
I think that's excellent, but I know that I am not an expert on technology.
I was going to have you do it. No, I don't know. I'm just going to think about it. Next week, we will not have a class. I'm just buried with stuff next week. We won't have a class, so we will 2 weeks. Hannah, you are awesome. Thank you so, so much. And are these things, I'm assuming they'll be, or if they haven't already been, uploaded into to our Dropbox?
I think it's a Google Drive, and I don't know if I got invited to it, but I will check with Heidi. I'll check in with her.
Help! Okay. All right. Yeah, the Google Drive Dropbox thing, whatever it is, it's going to be there.
Both.
Tim's rolling his eyes. All right. I love you guys. It's great to see you. If you haven't already put in your application to do a class or a presentation at the national convention, you know, the APG, ARS, and ARHE national convention, make sure you get that in there. If you're late, you need a little something to get you through the time limit, let me know. Maybe we can. Also, be thinking about what at that thing are we going to provide for our clients and the families. And I think I talked with y'all some about that already. Continue to think about it, because we'll be hitting on that real soon also. Because it's going to be, when we open this up to the clients and the families, it's going to be huge. It's going to get gigantic, the number of people that sign on. And we'll really have a chance to carry the message and some of the things that we're working. I love you guys. Hasta la vista.
Again.
It's good to see you again. I mean, it's okay. It's okay. Talk to y'all later. Have a good day. Good week.
Great week. Thank you.